Alright guys, this truck weighs about the same as a Ford Explorer. Being towed around by this nice little 1800 engine. Still warming up. So, yeah, she runs really good. Actually pulls this thing around pretty well. Climbs hills in third gear at about 45, which isn't too bad for that much weight. So in this video, we're going to talk about, we're going to show you how I built this start to finish. I do like a series of videos as we're doing it, and then what I'm going to do is start taking the whole video series and then putting it into one video, so that, you know, people that are just new to the channel who just want to watch the entire build, or if they want to use it as a reference to kind of learn how to build their own engine, they can watch all the things, including the parts, the engine build itself, and the first will it run, you know, first run of the engine, so you can hear it and see the problems we had at the end too. So anyway, hope you enjoy, and I'll talk to you in the next video. And what we're doing today is we're going to talk about engine parts for what I call a bulletproof engine. Most of the engines I build are in the bulletproof zone. The engines I'm trying to do, I try and outdo Volkswagen engineering. A lot of guys will say you can't do that, but you need to know that Volkswagen was building the people's car for the people, and things have changed a bit since then. We've got a lot more highways, freeways, higher speeds, all kinds of stuff like that. So again, we used a lot of information that we got from Porsche to do these as well, so that you end up with a better than factory engine. So, and again, they were building a people's car that was trying to be affordable. And we're not going there. We're going above that quite a bit. So that's why I say bulletproof engine for most of the builds that I do. This one's going to be a 74. I will probably never put another 69 together. It just doesn't make any sense to do one. When you can buy a 74 crank, counterweighted, 4140, 4340, for almost the same price as a 69, unless you buy a cast crank, and we don't go there. We're going bulletproof, not under spec what the original ones were. The original crankshafts were forged steel, and they were really good steel, but they just didn't have counterweights on them. So we're going to chromoly steel, which is even better than the factory. So we've got a 74 4140 chromoly crankshaft. We got 5325 chromoly rods. These are clearance rods. These have clearance built into them. Unlike the original stock ones, they will clear in a stock case. Typically, when you build a 74, you do not need to have your case machined. You need to do some work to it, but it's something I think just about anybody with a Dremel tool or a little grinder. I just use one of these little guys here, and that's all you need really. You should assemble the crankshaft, put it in here, put the rods on it. Usually I'll do that without the gears or any of the stuff on the front, and I'll just put it in there, pull it to the back a little bit so that it's where it would be if it's in there, rotate it, and you'll see right here and right here. This isn't the case I'm using, by the way. This is just another case I had. So right here, right here, right here, right here, all the way around. You make a little notch for the rod clearance. That's about it on a 74 most of the time, but you need to check it every time. Put it in, rotate it. Just make sure there's no other places where it's hitting in the case. I do it with it assembled together with the bolts, and then I'll take it apart and I'll put it in one half of the case, rotate it, check to see if everything's close enough, put it in the other half of the case, rotate it, and make sure that there's plenty of clearance for the counterweights on the crankshaft. That's just about it. It's basically a no-brainer, okay? So even a 76, a lot of times can be done the same way, but every once in a while you'll find that they'll hit. The 74 more than 99% of the time, it's not going to be a problem. I'm not going to say 100% because there could be something. So again, you got to put it in both halves of the case. Check it, make sure there's like, you know, 20 thousandths or something at least between the counterweight and the crankshaft or whatever's in the way. Just make sure, you know, you can almost eyeball that. So anyway, make sure there's plenty of room. Because as you think about it, the parts will expand and contract, so there might be some movement in there. Never usually a problem with 74. So anyway, 74, short rods. Now with short rods, you end up typically needing no shims or very few shims. It ends up being about the same as a stock deck height, typically. Like I say, everyone's the same, between 50 and 60 thousandths. 60 thousandths with stock, and I try and make it between 50 and 60 thousandths with this. But what you'll find out is this is always the problem when you go stroker, is you'll find out when you see the combustion chambers, your compression ratio is going to be a little higher. So with stock heads, a lot of times you want to have them step cut, which is what I got here. To keep the compression ratio from going up to like say 9 or something like that, I step cut the heads like that. And then what that does is it gives you a little more combustion chamber, lowers the compression ratio without having to put a ton of shims in there and having, say, a bunch of barrel fire. So in other words, if you have more than 60 thousandths, if you have like 60, 80, 90, whatever thousandths deck height on your piston, you're basically firing in the barrel more versus firing in the combustion chamber. And it's less efficient, so I like to try and get around the original deck height, which is 60 thousandths. I try and shoot for that. Now, there's other ways to build the same engine. You can use the same crankshaft, and you can go to like B pistons and 5 rods, I think it is. That's what CB Performance does. CB Performance has these crankshafts, their own made ones. They're not the same as these. They're both made in China, but they have their own people do it, and theirs are a bit cheaper than these, even wholesale. And they also sell a clearance rod set, but they don't sell the short rod. So I didn't want to go with CB Performance because I really wanted this engine to be as narrow as possible because of my fitment of the bucket truck that we're putting it in. It's pretty tight, so I didn't want it to be wider than stock and have to do a whole bunch of tin modifications. So anyway, there's that problem. Then I'm trying to solve. So anyway, so the heads are going to get all new valves because I have the valves were kind of shot that were in them. It's getting new guides in the exhaust, and I don't know if we'll have that on video or not. I also cleaned up the exhaust ports. If you look in here, I can get my pinky all the way through. A factory exhaust port on a single port head, you cannot do that, and they're very restricted on the exhaust, so it's a good idea to use this same tool and clean them up a little. It really helps a lot with the performance. So this is going to be an 1800. So we got 88 thick wall cylinders. We'll go over what that is in a minute. But I'm going to finish with this crankshaft. It's counterweighted crankshaft. So since it's a counterweighted crankshaft, what that does is the factory did not have these big counterweights on here. This is Porsche technology. This stuff was on Porsches, not on Volkswagen. So what that does is when this cylinder fires, the counterweight takes up a lot of that stress because it's firing right here, and it doesn't have to travel all the way through the crankshaft to the flywheel. So when that normally fires and you don't have a counterweight, there's more stress on the crankshaft, and that carries into the flywheel. So they had a heavier flywheel to make up for that. So what I like to do is, a lot of guys will say, God, you're putting in a bus, why don't you have a full-size flywheel? Well, because number one, the crankshaft's a bit heavier, so that's taking the stress away, and having a heavy flywheel as well will put more stress on the crankshaft, because now it's going to put some more, because of the weight here, it's going to put more through there, and go to the flywheel. That's why most guys will run a lightened flywheel when they run a counterweighted crank. If it makes sense to you, you'll understand what I'm saying, is that we're trying to make, again, a bulletproof engine. And if you put a lightened flywheel on a stock crank, they really don't work well. The engine kind of shakes a lot. When you have a lightened flywheel on a counterweighted crank, it doesn't do that. And that's because, again, it's designed that way. That's why they have these. Plus, the other thing is, this one's 8 doweled, okay? And that's stronger. It's got 8 holes in the flywheel. Now, I'd have to get a stock flywheel 8 doweled. Costs money to do that. It's actually cheaper to get a new flywheel. So we go that way. If you were looking at this, you wanted something like this, Crankshaft sells an engine kit with everything here and then some, and it's darn near close to the price that I pay wholesale, really. So honestly, if you're going to do it, I would just go through them. It's going to be a little bit different, but it's very, very similar to what I'm getting here. So they have them on their website, Crankshaft store. Again, I do not get anything from Crankshaft. There's not enough markup in their stuff. They do give me a wholesale price when I go in to see them, but that's because I've been going there for, I don't know, most of my life. But they have all the stuff at a really good price. You really can't beat their prices, even with the shipping and all that. It's really, really cheap for engine parts. Engine parts, you can't beat them. I mean, some of you guys that look at SIP1, some of their stuff's a really good deal, but engine parts, Crankshaft, it beats everybody. One of the things I like to do is, these are Schmidt, original equipment, Volkswagen. I like to go with Schmidt rod bearings. They're a little bit heavier than the Silverline, which if they don't have the Schmidt ones in stock, I'll use Silverline. But if they have them, because sometimes they don't have the particular size you're looking for, if you're going like 20 or something like that, you may not have them. But they do have standard ones, so I got a set of those. I'm going with Silverline mains. Again, a little cheaper than the Clobes, and they still work fine for main bearings. Going with Silverline dual thrust cam bearings, because they have the full thrust all the way around. When you're going performance cam, really good idea. So yeah, we're going with some stuff that's a little bit better than stock, and then some stuff we're going with the stock. We're going with original equipment, German reground lifters. These things they will last forever. Okay, this is a reground crank or camshaft that's ground to a W100 angle. Basically, they take a stock camshaft, they regrind it to the W100 grind. They only do 100 and 110. I think they don't do any others. They may do a couple others, but I'm not aware of them, so I don't know. I think they only do 100 and 110. They can't do bigger than that, because there's just, what they do is they take some material off of this side and use it over here. So they grind a lot off of this end, and then they're able to still get enough profile to go that big. So that's how they do it. If you look at a stock cam, it's really, really thick on this side. So they've got a lot of material there they can take off to get the lobe to go up that high. So it works. All right, so in this thing, I'm going with this 1,700 pound clutch. May not really be that necessary, but you know, might as well go big or go home. Then we're going with, because AA makes these and their wholesale price is really good, so I just get them. They got, you know, these get really good price at Crankshaft for these two. This here is a solid disc. It doesn't have the springs in it. And so I have that. It looks like it's got springs in it in the picture, but no, it's a solid disc. So I've got that one to go in there. So no rocket science to that. Pretty simple. We're going with the 26 millimeter Shedek pump, and we're going to explain that in a second. Hopefully I'll remember. We're using hardware kit. I buy a brand new hardware kit. It's got all the bolts and nuts and all that stuff for the engine. Kind of helps when you lost a few or something, or maybe your other ones are bad, and some I think have lock nuts on them and all that, so it's kind of nice. Goes together real good with a set of hardware kit. We're doing the 88 thick wall, and I'm going to show you guys what those are because a lot of people don't. I've explained this several times, but a lot of people just don't get my explaining. It's better to have visual aid. But if you see here how thin this is, it's super, super wafer thin on this end. And the skirts are going to need to get trimmed, so we're going to show that later. I'm going to do it myself. I talked to the machine guys, and they're like, nah, just cut them and weigh them, and you're fine. So it's super, super thin on this side where it goes into the case. Then on this side, it is super, super thick. Okay, because what you do is you get your heads, okay, you get your heads cut to for a 90.5. So if you're ordering heads, you order heads for a 90.5, and you buy the cylinders that are called 88 thick walls, and they come like this. So what this does is this slides into a regular 85.5 opening on a case. So it slides in there, and then on the top, all you're going to have to do is change the head opening, and you put these on there. And I'll explain in a second why we're doing that, why we're going there. We're not going with 90.5s, which 90.5s will be fine. You know, I love 90.5 cylinders. It just depends on the case you have. So if you're running a case like I've got here, then you're going to want to do it this way if you want it to be bulletproof. Again, bulletproof, again, is I'm trying to get the most out of this thing as I can. As bulletproof as possible. I want it to last. I want it to, you know, take some abuse. That's the whole reason for saying bulletproof. So here's actually the case I'm going to use. The reason we're going with 88 thick walls is because this is a stock B case from 1970. They only made these in 1970. It's a dual relief case, but it had 10mm studs in it. Because it had 10mm studs, the case savers are 14mm. So if I open this up for a 90.5, okay, let's see if I can get you guys a little closer. If I open this up for a 90.5, what's going to happen is it's going to be very, very close to, if not rubbing, the case saver. And if it's rubbing the case saver or that close to it, you've lost your strength around these, okay? And if you lose your strength around these, guess what happens? It's no longer bulletproof, is it? So again, I don't like to do 10mm, 90.5, or 92s, or anything like that if it's 10mm stud case. If it's an 8mm stud, you can do it. You can go to 92s or 90.5s. But if you go to 94, you cannot go to 94 in this case. You will have half your case saver showing all the way around. So if you go to 94 on a 8mm stud, it's going to be the same problem as doing a 90.5 with this case. So two things are cardinal rules of old school Volkswagen guys is don't go 94s. A lot of guys say don't do a 1914. Do a 1904 stroker crank and 90.5s. Or do a 1968 stroker 74 and 92 thick wall. The 92 thick wall is very similar to the 88 thick wall. It's a little bit thicker than the 88, but these are really thin. So, you know, that's why another reason I don't like to have them put lots of shims on there. Because if I have a lot of shims on there, you know, the cylinder's really, really thin. It may crack or something. Don't really want to go there. So I'd rather just go with them being against the case or very close, very little shims or none. So this is the case we're going with. So we can't open that up. Well, we can, but we're not going to. You can. People will do it all the time. They'll do 94s and they'll do 90.5s with 10mm studs, but it's not a good idea. Most of your old school Volkswagens will say, no, don't do that. So why am I going 26 and not 30 on the oil pump? If you port match everything and your oil pump right here, you're going to put it in there, check and make sure the hole lines up, file it a little bit, make sure it's real nice and even straight, goes straight into that pump. You can get enough oil pressure out of a 26. But on the bucket truck, we need to have that second pulley on here to run the engine. So yeah, there's that issue there. So I just figured, just to be safe, I'll run a 26 millimeter pump. Again, I use 26s in most of my other engines. I don't have any issues with oiling. The 21 or whatever it is, there was barely enough to even oil an engine. Those things were like, might as well have slingers, you know. It was like, those things didn't have enough oil to me. I don't know. Well, maybe they did, but every time I've ever run one of those, I had issues. So I'd rather not. I just go to 26. So anyway, and that's what came stock on this case anyway. So we're going to go full flow case, and then because I'm running the stock fan shroud, I want to run the stock fan shroud. Again, it's for aesthetics. The original air cleaner goes on a bracket that's connected to the fan shroud. And if it's not the right fan shroud, it's not going to properly reach the intake manifold. So I want to make sure that I can use that stock air cleaner on it. I want the engine to look completely stock when you open the hood, other than the intake's going to be larger because it's a single port instead of a 40 horse. Another thing I like to use on something that's anything that's performance is the Type 3 cooling system. And, you know, again, people will say this doesn't work. I mean, Volkswagen had a bulletin out that says it doesn't work. And we checked this stuff years ago and found out the engine definitely runs cooler with this tin on it. Head temps were lower. So, okay. What this does is it meters the air going around the cylinders to go through these passages. So it has to go all the way around the cylinder. Normally when you blow a piston, it's right between this stud or this stud. Okay? That's usually where it goes. And this allows air to go around here and through this metered hole. And then once it maxes out the airflow through the cylinders, which is where less of the heat is, more airflow goes through the head. And then it has these two end things to help it go all the way around the head. So these do work. I mean, I don't know how possibly, just from looking at it, guys, how somebody could think that this doesn't work. Anyway, you can always comment that below why you think it doesn't work. And you can comment below why you think it does. It makes sense to me. When more air goes through the heads are where all the combustion is created. Because we don't like to have barrel fire, we're going for combustion chamber fire, right? Combustion chamber fire, with the fires happening up here, that's where the heat is. So we want to cool that part of the head as much as we can, and those deflectors will cover this portion of the head and help the air direct and go through it better. And we have these little shields on there, so we'll get as much air through those heads as possible. In fact, another good thing to do is take your heads. Again, I'm doing a lot of engine prep stuff right now, and look through all the air ports on them and make sure that they're clear. You'll find a lot of times that, especially if you got crappy aftermarket heads, if you have like the AA Performance or the Panchitos, the air ports look pretty good. I think these ones I already looked through, they look pretty good. They're pretty open. Air can get through them pretty well. So we want as much air going through those heads as possible to keep it from detonating. So I think I've covered pretty much everything and why we're using it. We're going to build a pretty strong engine here. Something that will hopefully take the weight of this truck. I know there's going to be people that say, why don't you go with a 40 horse again? Because that's what it came with. Okay, listen. This truck never left mains, probably. I bet it never ever drove. It was shipped to mains, okay, and it stayed there until they decommissioned it. All right, and so it's never been on an Autobahn. It wasn't designed to go on Autobahn. It was designed just to go around town and fix lights, and that's it. So I'm driving it 50, 60 miles on the freeway. This thing's never been on a freeway ever. It only had, what, 60,000 kilometers on it? Something like that. It's never done that. It wasn't designed for that. So we're trying to over-engineer it a bit so that we can get it to some car shows without blowing up the engine. Now, this thing wasn't a virgin, you guys. This thing had more than one engine in it. With only 60,000 kilometers, it's had more than one engine. And the reason I know that is you see that little thing there? Little circle with the VW on it? That's a VW reman, factory reman case. And I can't use it because it's just so badly water damaged in the bottom. I thought about maybe figuring out a way to save this thing, but it's so badly water damaged in the bottom that it's just, you know, it's kind of cool because it's got cam bearings in it too. So when they did a VW factory German reman, they actually put cam bearings in them. It's kind of interesting. Unlike the Canadian, is this the Canadian one? Or not? It's the 10 millimeter or the BK70. But unlike the Canadian one down here, they didn't do the cam bearings. So that's kind of weird. I don't know how they must have rebored the cam because they cut the case halves. So it's kind of weird. What we're doing is, the first thing we're going to do is we want to remove all of these set screws. They need to be removed, clean out the passages, and then red Loctite them, or some guys blue Loctite. You can do whatever you want and whatever you feel comfortable with. We like the red Loctite usually, and go from there. So these little plugs, we're going to Loctite these in. We're going to clean this all out. There's a lot of cleaning. Off camera, we take everything apart. Everything gets clean. So I had a lot of people on my other video say we didn't clean anything. Oh my goodness. No, everything's completely cleaned before we put it together. Even the case here, going to get re-cleaned again before we put it all together. We're just kind of laying stuff out right now, and we're going to do our mock-up so that we can machine this, and then we'll clean it after we done, you know, machine out the areas for the crankshaft. So we're going to be doing that right now. Let's get busy. So we ran, you can run pipe cleaners through here if you want. You can, there's a lot of different ways to clean this. You could also use carb spray and just blow it through, whatever you feel comfortable with. We got them all cleaned out already, so I'm not going to exactly show you everything I'm doing, but you can use your imagination. For you guys who don't know, I'm just going to mention this in this video. George is going to start a new YouTube channel, so stay tuned. Eventually I'll put that link in the description here, and keep on the videos. Make sure you're subscribed, because you'll see that pop up in one of these videos coming up when he gets it rolling. And then he's an amazing, one of the most amazing fabricators, machinist, engine builder that I know. And I basically learned a lot from him. Most of the stuff that I know about engines I learned from the shop. You know, and I'm not as good as they are. So you can imagine he's going to be pretty neat when he gets that going. So stay tuned for that. We got our rods clean, laid out. We got our bearings, and we always clean off this gray stuff that's on here. I'll show you in a second. All right, so this time we're going to choose Scotch-Brite, and we just go like this. Couple swipes. Not too much, just a little bit, just to get that stuff off. Some guys use a rag. You can do it however you want. And then we're going to use a rag afterwards and clean the remaining off. But getting this stuff off this surface of the bearing, this ends up in the oil and ends up in the pickup later in the time when you're breaking in.
Don't film it.
All right, here we go. 2 fingers. I usually do them with a rag. So okay, that one's ready. Let's do this one. More like that. 2 fingers in the middle. All right, ready to go. All right, little acetone on the rag. Clean them out really good. See how look at all you get off of there, just from the acetone. Otherwise, that ends up in the oil, ends up in the pickup. Not good. All right, so we're putting in the bearings. If you kind of give them just a little tiny bit of pressure, just to even it in, and then push right mainly from my left thumb here, this just holds it in place. You don't want to push from the middle. So, and then I kind of work them, center them in. Again, I was not the engine builder, but I did a few at my house. You know, the shop did them. But he's going to make sure that I do it myself this time. So I've been getting coached here. So I'm not pushing here. Okay, I'm pushing here. I'm just kind of finalizing it like that. And those little bit of scratches that are in there actually will help retain oil. I mean, if your bearing ever touches your crankshaft, it's done. It should always have oil between it and the crankshaft. So, and we're just going to push it a little bit here and then slide them into place and kind of work them in back and forth all the way in. Okay, do them all and check it out later. So on these, the tangs here, these little tangs go down. The two tangs go together and the rod goes like this. Usually the numbers are up if you have numbers on them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to mark the top side of the rod like here. So the tangs are down, so we just mark right here that that's the top, because these don't have the little marks like the stock ones do. You see the stock ones had a little bump on them. Cast marking. They don't have it on the AA short rods or any of the clearance rods. You can see how these have that sticking out. The new ones don't. Just kind of showing you that's why these rods are, plus the bolts are flatter on this end when they go around. So that's not the case. You got to have the clearance rods for 74. We like to lube the threads and this part right here. So again, guys, we've gone ahead and got these assembled. We got our marks up this way and this one. And then this one would be this direction, right? And then this one goes that way. So we know the place you mark. It's just easier. You can use the numbers too. Just depends on how you want to do it. But I like to put a mark on there just to double check. It's easy to get wrong. And then the two numbers should be together here. So you'll know if it doesn't, see how that moves nice and freely. We're using a different assembly lube than we did on some of the other builds. So it doesn't matter. You can use whatever you want. You can use oil or you can use this stuff here. This is the Ultra Slick Permatex. But as long as once we torque these down, as long as there's no hard spots in them and they're just perfectly evenly feeling all the way around, it should be good to go. So we're going to go with that. So we're torquing down our ARPs going on in the background. I'm not going to show torque specs. You guys can look that up on your own, because if I'm wrong, anyway, you guys do this at your own risk. We're going to just clean our bearings, give them a real quick clean that way. 2 fingers in the middle. And just kind of go swiping back and forth like that. 2 fingers in the.
You know what? I'm getting old.
All right. We're going to clean these after. Guys, we have not cleaned this case totally yet. Just so if you see those metal shavings on there, that's all going to come out of here, because we're just going to assemble the crank clean. Be very careful. Set it in here. Mock it up, and just because we're going to end up opening this up here for the 74. So we'll show you how to do that in a minute, but we set the bearings in, okay, and then mark them. So this might not be the same as the other video that we made, because this is a different builder. So everybody does this different. So there's different ways to learn it. It's really good to learn different ways, so you find out the way you like the best. You know, there's a guy mentioned he had a problem with his dowel pins not lining up. Of course, there's dowel pins in the holes here. So he said his dowel pin, his crankshaft, as soon as he tightened up the halves, it wouldn't seat. So when you put it in, the other thing you can do is look for daylight below here. And you can take a flashlight, hold on the other side, and look through and see if there's any daylight to make sure that the bearings are all the way down in. And then you can pull them back out a few times and make sure those pins are down all the way in the hole, because sometimes they don't go all the way down in there. And when you go tighten the case halves up, it binds. So anyway. Okay, you know, something I want to show you guys is different builders do different things. And some guys port match the bearing to the case. And, you know, we were kind of going over this, and we never did this on new builds, on a rebuilt engine, on a just standard build. This is something kind of came up later. And when the oil goes from the round hole to this groove, okay, it's kind of like a river going into the ocean where it just kind of goes out. So port matching it, I don't even know if it really would help that much. I mean, it just depends on you. If you want to do it, you can put a little bit of paint on here. Okay, you can put a little bit of paint on here. Drop the bearing in place. Okay. If you're doing a race engine, maybe you want to do it just for fun. Drop the bearing in place and then see where it lines up with this groove. It's going to be a little bit off. They're always a little bit off, okay? And then you just take a little grinder and just kind of help it make a little groove in it. So in my other video, I show that. This one, we're not going to do that way because we are not going to be putting that kind of RPMs at all in this engine at all. This thing is maybe going to hit 4,500 RPMs, you know, on a good day, and that's going to be where it's going to go. So we're not looking to get all that oil super duper race stuff done. So whether you do that or not, it's up to you. If you ever want to know which direction to put this in, the pin side is to the back. Okay. So if you look here, how the pins offset, and these ones are, well, they're all pins offset to the back. That's how you know that that bearing goes on this way, because that's the back right here, or the front, or however you want to do it. The flywheel side, this goes that way. Favorite method, the hot plate method. My old high school teacher used to use a hot oil. He heated it up with a torch. It was stank and everything. You put them in the oil. So the edge here, the sharp edge goes to this side. And then you see how this is rounded in here, because the other side's rounded, goes on there. And put this gear on first. Oh, right, your Woodruff key has to be all the way in, really even. So take your time and put that in really good. Is it tight enough? Too tight? We're going to use the super knot. Awesome. We don't like to get them too hot, so you know, take the temper out of the gear. So that's why we use this tool right here. That's been around for years. And then these things should fit really nice and tight, otherwise it can rattle on there. Nice and tight on the thing, like that. Good way to know whether you got everything in correctly is this. If this clip lines up and is straight, you're good to go. If it's in there and it's crooked like this, something's not all the way in. Then just don't even bother trying to put the clip on. So anyway, we'll put the clip on. We're good to go. Let it cool first for us. We don't want to hurt ourselves. So at this point, we're just going ahead and mock it up. And this is just to mock it up to see whether it's clearance. This case was already clearanced. I think I showed you guys earlier in the video, or earlier in another video, but I'll show you what they do. And what you do is you just rotate it around, okay? And you hold the rods as if, you know, you mock it up and hold the rod so that the rod would be where the piston is, right? So the piston's not going to be over here, right? It's going to be right in the middle. So you work it around and, you know, on the other side and on this side so that these don't hit. And then right here, you can see down in there, see if I can get you guys to see. Right down there, it goes by and they're already cut out right there. I don't know if you can see that. I'm trying to get, and kind of do this with it a little bit. It should clear this area. Let's look at the other side of the case. So you can see that's already been cut out right there. That's what you have to do on a 74, is you just clearance that little area, a little bit of grinding right there, like that. Mock it up, see where it hits. Use a Sharpie and cut it away a little bit right here. So it's right here, maybe a little tiny bit of that rib, just a little bit right here, a little bit right here. Again, we're going to mock up both sides of the case so we make sure it doesn't hit. And then we'll proceed to cleaning this. The reason we don't clean it beforehand is because we're going to make metal shavings. We're going to cut all this out, and we're going to do our final cleaning, then we're going to assemble it. So anyway, it looks like this one's already been done. You can see that right there. That little groove is all that needs to be done for a 74. So it's really not hard to do. So we remachined these just so you guys can see. It's around the center of this rib here, around the center of that one. Maybe just you find the top of the opening and do about that. If you want to do it ahead of time, before you mock it up, you can kind of do this. Take that out a little bit right there. Take a little bit out that right there. Here's the other case half. So you got one here, or the center of that rib. So you can see where it is. Center of that rib there, just about. Right here. We just redid it again. It was already done. So this case has already been a 74 once. Weird. Or maybe, I don't know. It was already machined right there. Somebody did it. So anyway, that's how it's done. 74 is ready to go. All right, so we set the crank in, make sure all the dowel pins line up, and then check the center. We're good. No walkies. With the rods up. So we're ready to go on that, but we got to check our cam. Insert the cam bearings. Main thing we got to check is the cam. Make sure the gear is right. So on the back side of your cam gear, you see that number, -1? They had up to -5 +5. Or +7. +5 +7. And so a lot of people think maybe if you get an original one, it'll fit right in. Well, maybe, maybe not. If it doesn't fit, you're going to have to drill out these rivets and then step drill here and then put nuts on and thread that guy there. I think, do you thread it or no?
Yes.
You have to thread it, yeah. And do it that way. So better hang on to a bunch of your old cams in case, and then look at them, see the numbers on there, and look for the little number in the back. They're all different, and they had to do that because of where it was at in the bore. You know, if the line bore was a little bit different off, then I don't know how it worked out, but anyway, it would make that a little bit off, and so you had to you want a little bit of play in that gear, just a little bit. Now, if it's too much walkie-talkie in there, it'll be noisy. You'll hear the motor rattling when it's idling, and if it's nice too tight, and then you'll wear your bearings out. So you got to get it just right, the feel of it. Like this one here is +2. You can see that. And all it is just a stock gear.
And then we drill out the rivets, but then we have to countersink that.
We have a countersink that goes in there a bit. That was in the back shop. I remember you showed it to me.
Like that,
Oh, that's what you use there. So that type of thing there, used to make them.
So that's so the bolt head will clear the pump.
Ah, yeah. Otherwise, if you just put bolts on there, yeah, it'll hit the oil pump. That's for sure. All right, so we were going to set the cam bearings, and I noticed one thing that I might have not shown in another video. There's a tang on here, and there's no tang on this side of the case because it's a double thrust bearing. So you can see this side has the tang in it still. So this one here is where the one with the tang goes. And what we do is take a bench grinder and just grind that guy off for the other side. If you want to make sure that thing's gone, you know, so it fits in the case. Again, this is all the way we do it. You guys can do it however you want. This is not a how-to video. This is just how we do it. And, you know, you can take it or leave it and do it your own way. We're not doing that. We're just doing, this is us building a motor. So we got the cam in. We got just, if you can hear it, it's really, there's a little bit of play in different areas of it. Got to rotate it around a few times. You can hear that little tiny bit of rattle. So this one's really nice and tight, but it's not over tight. So let's see. You don't want it to, if it's too tight, when I turn it, this thing will walk out, okay? So it's not doing that. And I got a little tiny bit of play. Just, you can hear that. You can hear that? So that's actually good. So we're going to go with that. If it's really, really rattly, then it's too loose. You might have to change the cam gear to whatever, a +1. Is it plus or -1? -1 if
You already got -1 in there. You go 0 plus, and goes +7, and then it goes 0 to -7.
Yeah.
So there's 15 different combos.
Wow. So anyway, if it's really loose, if it's really rattly, you'll hear it when it's running and it doesn't sound good. So it's got to be a little tiny bit of play. Just barely can feel it. And then we've rotated around a few times and it seems to be okay. Like watch a rivet and move it around, watch another rivet, and just check it in places.
Oh, mother.
And the little bit that's there will kind of wear in. All right, so we're in time, guys. We're good. All right, so our O-rings are on. We'll put those down. We got the oil pump. We like to put it on and just make sure that it's going to clear. And we've already rotated this around, put the rivets next to it. It's plenty of distance in there. You just got to check it. Sometimes if you got a 30 or something like that, it may not work. You know, may hit the. You have to grind the back inside of that sucker off. This part right here. And get that thing out of there without dropping the gears out. All right there. Yeah. Right there. Good hit right there. You're going to have a problem with a dish cam, you know, the later model. These flat ones usually don't have an issue, but just check it. Never hurts. And this end's already plugged here. We checked the case. It's nice and tight. This was really good. Some guys will say you plug both of them. I think that's really like an aluminum case. I've seen the aluminum cases are a lot looser than the stock ones, so we're not going to bother plugging both of them for the full flow on this. It really doesn't make any sense on one that's perfectly tight. Yeah, so we're putting on, we like to use the Yamaha Bond or Honda Bond, or whatever one of those for the case halves.
Number 4.
Yeah, you can use the Permatex if you want, but that's kind of the old way. We came up with this idea a long time ago, and everybody kind of likes it. So if you put the stuff on this side of the case versus putting it on this side, you don't have to go around the studs. So a little trick there, guys, if you didn't know that one. Then we got to put don't forget this thing. If you do, you're taking it back apart. But yeah, make sure it's the right one too. There's a 40 horse one that's smaller and a 36 horse. I don't know if the 36 horse and the 40 are the same, but I know that 40 horse one's different. So we got to make sure we get our cam plug in. And our lifters are oiled. Our mark is right. Timing mark, double check it. Can't hurt to do it twice. Make sure all the O-rings are on. Everything's there, and then put the case half on. Process was really fun. It was really nice to hang out with George. I don't really get much chance to do that anymore. I hadn't seen George in a long time, and we just run into each other places. And then finally, when he retired, and I had a little more time, you know, there was never time, you know. So it was great to be able to be there. His shop's kind of new. He just put this up, and he's still moving stuff into it. There's like tons of buildings out there with just amazing stuff in them. I couldn't even tell you guys what's in there, but you know, some of the stuff was kept from the shop. I thought all of it was gone, but you know, he did keep a lot of the good stuff, and managed to do that through, I don't know, all the different difficulties of life that happened between, you know, the late 90s and now. So anyway, it was really kind of fun there, hanging out, you know, just able to do our thing, and brings back old times, let me tell you. It's really fun. As a practice, see how that's at there? You make sure it's in there deep enough when you push it in. So then you turn it, it goes in. So it's in there about 3/16 of an inch, so that should be fine. Always want to make sure you got enough bite in there. So I've seen people put like grease on their oil pumps. Really, I wouldn't recommend doing that because really all you need is like 2 drops of oil on there, just enough to crank the engine over until the oil pump primes. If you put anything else in there, it's going to end up in your oil galleries, and eventually, it could clog something. So it's best just to put 2 drops of oil, let the oil pump prime, and then what we do is we take the coil wire off, crank the engine over after you're done putting the engine together with oil in it, and let it run through all the galleries and prime up and turn the engine oil light off, or usually I have a gauge on it and I'll watch it and make sure it goes up to 40 pounds or better or something. And then go ahead and continue on. And the oil did its job, not any other kinds of additives or anything. A lot of times you'll use studs on these, but this needs to go on either. We used to use Gasca cinch. It was like a contact cement on these, but we don't have any, so this goes on either dry or with a really, really almost nothing adhesive. And nothing on there. That's a metered gasket right there. So make sure it doesn't fold. Put it on, we're good. So what we've done now is we've stripped all the pistons down, and then got them all just raw piston here. Got all the rings off. I do my rings, I take one groove off, I take the top one off, they take the middle one, I put it in the second groove over, and then I take it off that way so that I don't break them. And then the oil rings usually not a problem. I just take one off, take them off in 3 pieces, no problem. All right, so we just take the micrometer. We have it set at 200 thousandths. So that's what we figured out. I don't know if I were going to do a 74, or if you did short rods or long rods or whatever, I'd still cut them. I don't know, or at least check them. But we figured 200 thousandths is what we needed to take off. So that's what we found out.
We started off at 120, and we added another 75, and that's what. Yeah,
we started off with a 125, and it still hit.
Yeah.
So then we went to like 175, and we didn't feel comfortable. It was still too close, so we went to 200, and then we got plenty of clearance. So that's where we're at. You can do whatever you think is right, but that's where we're thinking we're at. So we describe them like that
with the calipers,
and then we use the caliper, of course. You use the caliper, just lock it in. You lock the caliper at 200 thousandths, do them all the same. And we mocked it up here and made sure that, and we do that with the thing here. And you could use a cutoff wheel, or not a cutoff wheel, but a grinder with like a flap wheel or something, and just very slowly. Don't try and do too much at a time. Just go right up to your line. That's the way a lot of guys do it. We got this fancy machine, you guys. So. You look right there, you can just barely see the line. So we took it right up to the line and did them all the same. Then we're going to weigh them, make sure they're all the same. But I've had other guys that said they weighed them afterwards and there was no change in variance between them. So we'll check that and get back to you guys. Look at this. So we got done doing them all. I mean, all you got to do is, however you want to get it to that line perfectly, you can sit there with a file and do it, whatever. I would suggest if you're going to use the flap wheel that you'd want it going this direction, not too much going that way with a heavy grit or anything, or use a finer grit. Just take your time. But look, 428. What's that one? 428. 428. 428. Now watch. That's just a piece of paper.
Oops. Didn't do it that time.
No, it didn't do it that time. You did. Yeah, 436.
432.
432 with a piece of paper on it. So that's how accurate you can do it by just using that scribe method. You can measure them if you want, but you should have a gram scale and check it just to make sure. But anyway, that's a little.
And if you need to take it off, you can take it off down inside of here.
You can take it off right in there, one of those little ribs or something.
Yeah, in between that little dot or whatever, just anywhere in that area. Right?
Yeah, a little dot, the ribs or
Take it
something.
off, drill press and
Little tiny
take
bit.
A little bit.
You can only take a little tiny bit. That's going to be it. Anyway, that's how you do it. If you were going to do it yourself, and that's how we do it, you guys can follow our way to do it. You can not do it. You can take it to a machine shop, have them do it. It's up to you completely. It's, your engine. So anyway, that's how we do it. And look at that. Perfect. All right, I wanted to talk to you guys about the benefits of going stroker. Really, unless you really just want to save $100, that's really all you're looking at. If you're going to do a counterweighted 1600, you're not going to save much by doing that, and you'll get a lot more power with a 74. You'll have a 4140 crank, 4340, one of the two, whatever you do. You end up with a better engine because the parts are just cheaper now for doing stroker versus doing the 1600. They're just, they're not cheaper, but it's just worth it, believe me. So these are copper. And so what you can do is a lot of different things you can do when you go stroker because you've got more options. All right, so you could do this engine with the 5325 rods that we're doing the same thing. And what I ended up with was we checked our deck height just with a raw piston. We're putting the rings on right now, and it was at 35 thousandths. Now, on a normal engine, that would be a little too tight. If you went to 35 thousandths, it's doable, but you got to step cut your head, and you have to run copper gaskets and stuff like that. But you won't end up with a deck height that low usually on a regular 1600. You're usually going to end up at around 50 or 60, somewhere in there, and then that's perfect. You can't make your deck height lower, and not unless you have your cylinders machined or something like that. So our deck height was 35. So to make the compression lower, because I want this thing to run like a tractor, we're going with copper shims on the top. Okay, so what's the benefit of that? And look, this is why, because I can put this cylinder in here, and you can see I had them cut it for 94, so there's no edge of a cylinder, so I could run these up to 0. I could run a flat deck height with this setup, okay, because I've got them open for 94s, okay, or 92. These are open for 92 because they don't have a machine for 88s. So the piston, even if it was up all the way, it would still be whatever the thickness of that is, which are probably about 80 thousandths, looks like to me, from the head. So even running them at 0 with no copper shims would be fine on this setup. So there's a lot more options when you have stroker, because you can have, let's say I got 5.4 rods instead of 5.325s. That's 100 thousandths more taller, or 94 or something, I don't know, but near 100 thousandths more piston height. Then I say I could run 60,000 shims or whatever on the barrels and bring it up to where I have the piston right at the top of the cylinder like every other engine usually is made. Okay, then you can step cut your heads like here. You see how I'm step cutting? That's what a step cut is. Let's get you up close so you can see that little step in there. I have them step cut the heads. Now I can get all the fire in the barrel. That lowers your chance of getting detonation with a lower compression ratio, with a higher compression ratio. So you could run higher compression. We could even run this at 8.6, where it would be, you know, when I ran the numbers on the CB performance calculator, it came out to 8.6 to 1 without these copper shims. But with these copper shims in it, it comes out to 7.9, let's just say 8, okay, which is above stock. Stock is 7.5. All right, so if I run these, I literally could, this thing's gonna be like a tractor, and that's what we want with this engine. Okay, but if you didn't want that, you wanted performance, you could run it like that and then do the 5/4 rods and run it straight to 0, and then you could get up to about 9 or something like that, and 8 3/4 to 9 to 1 by running it at 0, and you have all your fire in the head, less chance of detonation. I'm just saying, you think about this, there's a lot of options that you can do when you do a 74 that you can't do when you do a 69. And you know, it's like I said, it's about $100 difference in price because you have to buy the clearance rods. Okay, that's really all it is. CB Performance rods has those 5/4s, stock size rods. The one we're running is 5.325. So, and the reason I'm doing that, I would go with the 5/4s, but the reason I'm doing the 5.325s is I didn't want the engine to be too wide, because the bucket truck has had a 40 horse in it, and my metalwork was a little bit off. Okay, it was about, you know, let's say 1/8 of an inch off, right? So when I put the engine in, it's really tight on the left side. So if I make an engine, you know, a 1600 or 74 or whatever is wider than a 40 horse, right? So if I actually put more shims in there in addition to that, now I'm going to add even more width to it. And I didn't want to do that. So, but in your bug or whatever, you can play with this a lot. You can do so much stuff by going, by going to 74, you can get your deck height to 0 with these 88s, no problem. You know, put it up, mock it up, look in there, and make sure that there's no edge sticking out from this, right? Or you can just run, they have these in 40 and 60, and put these in the top and run. What most cars do is they have a head gasket, which is that's what this is, right? They have a head gasket, and what that does is it gives you all your fire in the combustion chamber, which is more efficient, which is less chance of detonation. So those are things to think about that you can do with a 74 you cannot do with a 1600. So anyway, I could see somebody taking an 88 by 74 and making something really pretty fast. I mean, I think you could probably get at least 100 horsepower out of it. And I'll tell you, 100 horsepower in a bug is fun. It is fun. It's like a 350 V8 with a cam and a Camaro. Fun. All right. So you want to go really, some guys say, oh, you got to go 2332 to be fast, and you got to have a bigger, you don't really. You can have a whole lot of fun with an 1800. And especially when you do this kind of thing and you bump the compression up, you get it up to like 9 to 1 or 9.5 even, or something like that, by playing with putting all the fire in the head. Just food for thought, guys. I'm just telling you, you know, it's not hard to machine these pistons. You saw that. It's really pretty easy. No brainer. They all measured the same weight. So a lot of things you can do when you just go to that stroker, and it's really not that hard. Just make sure you mock up that case, because if you run their rods, the bolts might be different. I don't know on the CB Performance, so they might bump. You might have to do a little bit more work on there. So you've got to mock it up and check it, okay? But it's not hard. Anybody can do it. If you can build a 1600, you can build a stroker 74, pretty much. All right, talk to you guys a bit later. Got all the studs in with blue Loctite. Well, sometimes when you don't know where your ring compressor is, I should have drug mine out, but these things kind of work. It's terrible. But anyway, ordered a new one. A good Volkswagen one. So we're doing them like this. You mock them up like that. The arrow's going back. And then you just push your wrist pin in. Put it in place. Set the rings. The top, 10 and 2. Never set the ring gap on the bottom. Sometimes the oil coagulates on the bottom, and it'll, when it settles and sits there, it'll go up the cylinder and leak into the compression and start up, and you'll get a little puff of oil. So we do them that way, 10 and 2. Drop them in. Talk to you guys later. Arrows to the back. Flywheel side, actually. The front, actually, if you guys want to get technical, but you know what I mean. Front's the back of the engine. That's a real torque wrench. Yep, there it is. Torque the flywheel.
Let's go to 250.
Makes me feel better at 250 too. That's the old school way we did it. I bet it doesn't even move, hardly. Nope. 230 and 250, no change. Cool. That's the old torque wrench from the shop we had. All right, well, a couple things we didn't show in the video. I wanted to kind of go over them now. One of the things I forgot to mention is when you put your lifters in, of course, you oil them, of course, you know, the sides of them and where it contacts the cam. Really important. And then they need to spin. If they don't spin freely, if there's hard spots in them when you spin them around, that's going to be an issue. You're going to have a worn out cam very quickly. Seen that before many times. Lifters need to spin when you put them in. Another thing is again, we put this is type 3 cooling system. A lot of people say it doesn't work. If you see these deflectors here, helps bring more air around the head, okay? And our main thing with this is meter what we're putting over the cylinders. We want to get as limited air as we can over the cylinders and have lots more air on the heads, because of course now we've got all of our combustion going on in the head pretty much. There's, you know, 35,000 deck height is really tight. I mean, again, you can go to 0 if you know, you can play around with the 74. You can get the 4 rods, and then, you know, you'll have a shim here, and you'll have the, you know, all the fire in the head if you do the step cut and or the head gasket. You can just use the head gaskets at 60. Some guys do that, and the 60,000 head gaskets, you can do that too. So, and not step cut it. So it's up to you. There's a lot of options you can do when you use those head gaskets, especially with an 88, because you've got such a, you know, you're going to have they only make a 92 head gasket. So either 90.5s or 92 all use the same head gasket. So they'll be way far away from the piston. It's, you know, it works out really nice to have those head gaskets and use it that way. So you can run a really tight tolerance. You can't do that with a 1600 because the barrels, it just doesn't work out. The numbers don't work out. The other thing is, again, we put the cool tin on. I put the heads on off camera. We had a little bit of a trouble We had to stop and start again, stop and start again, because again, this was not an engine that I took apart. This case is different. I didn't have all the stuff that matches up with the case. We had to find head studs, you know, all kinds of stuff. I brought a bunch of 1500 ones, so we did that. We had to look for those. So it was a little bit of a goose chase in there. Did find some cool parts, the two little shop tools that he had when we were looking around George's shop. Again, this engine is not running a cooler in the fan shroud. We're going to run all of our cooler outside the fan shroud. No, I will not put it over the fan inlet. That is a no-no. That makes it run hotter than stock. But what this is going to do is, because I want it to look like the original engine, typically I'll use the doghouse fan shroud to get the maximum cooling. But we can't do that because I have to run the original fan shroud on this engine to be able to get the air cleaner, the stock air cleaner, mount up properly. All that stuff matters. So I want this engine to look original, like the 40 horse that was in it, because it's going in the bucket truck, which is this thing here, which is a original Volkswagen product. It's actually a SO10, the special model. There's probably only 2 dozen of them left in the world, probably. But anyway, that is split window ones. There's some bay window ones out there, but split window ones, very rare. They always rusted out. You know, the treasure chest area would just be wasted, kill the whole thing. And they're not allowed to drive them in Europe anymore, so you have to get it certified. The lift has to be certified over there to be able to just even drive the truck. I don't know all their rules, but anyway, some guys have just told me these things, so maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. Second-hand information. So the rocker arms, again, when we just slide the push rods in, give them a little oil on the ends. Same thing, you know, a lot of stuff is going to get oil. As soon as that engine cranks over enough, it's going to go over, I don't know how many revolutions before the oil gets on everything. And again, when I put the oil pump on, I put 2 drops of oil, one on each gear, and I put a little bit on the end of that shaft and a little bit on the shaft itself. You know, just a little tiny drop of oil on each piece. That's it. And just enough to get it so that when it spins over. I did notice in the section when I was running the cam around, okay, it almost looked like the cam jumped out, but it didn't. What it was is the oil we were using is, you know, I've used a lot of times, I've done it with motor oil. You know, this is George's way to do it. He likes to use that stuff, so we're doing it that way when we're at his shop. So whichever way, everybody's way usually works fine. You can use motor oil to assemble your parts. If you use motor oil to assemble your parts, or if you use, I used to use motor oil and STP mixed together. Everybody has their different way to do it. It will turn over easier, and that oil is very, very sticky. It's actually really good for an assembly because it stays on the bearings and all that until that oil comes through. It really gives it a good lubrication for those first few revolutions until it turns over. And you'll find that, you know, that's kind of sticky though when you turn it around. So I was pushing the rods and I pushed the crankshaft up out of position. So that was what happened there. It was actually the crankshaft that kind of moved up, not the cam. And I actually had to reset the bearings too, because George looks at it and he goes, "Hey, your crank's out of place." And I'm like, "Oh shoot, I wonder how I did that." And it was actually, I could see it in the video where I actually pulled the rods, because I was using the rods to turn it around, because it's very stiff with that oil. It turns freely, but it's very stiff. So it's just the type of oil it is anyway. So again, you can use whatever oil you like to use to do your assembly. It's up to you. In the next video, I'll be doing the assembly of the tin and all that stuff. I might have to do some modifications. I'm not sure if I'm going to have to put a breather system. I might run it without it and see if it works. If it doesn't, then I'll put a breather system on it at that point. It might with a 74, because it has those big counterweights going around, and they like to cause like a fan inside that engine. So I'll probably have to do something to modify the breather system. So I'll do that later in the other videos. Again, this thing's set up like a tractor. We're not going for RPMs. We're going for really low torque stuff. And it's, you know, that's basically all it's going to do. So yeah, I could feel that play in the cam, but when I was trying to film it, of course, it didn't want to do that. And it's probably because when I was cranking it around, even before I did the video, I pulled the crankshaft out of place. But when I got it down in there, it gives you a little tiny bit of play, which tells me everything's okay. Again, before putting the two case halves on, I don't know if I showed it, but I dropped this bearing in the center main, dropped it over the top to make sure it didn't rock, and it didn't. So that was when I know that we had everything in place. And of course, when I tightened up the two case halves together, it still rotated freely, so that wasn't an issue there. Again, I didn't show that because unfortunately there's a lot of distractions because we had to stop and get parts and go look around for stuff, and you know, just a lot of things like that that happened during the time when we were making it. So you know, we ran into some issues, like I said, putting the heads on. We just if you're gonna buy the hardware kits for the heads, I really would not recommend using the head bolts that they give you with those. I really wasn't happy with these head nuts. These were okay, but the head nuts, I would not use them. Take your original ones if you have them. Unfortunately, I didn't bring any with me because I had trouble getting my parts clean. I need a basket to put them in my sonic cleaner. So anyway, I haven't done that yet. I'm still looking. I have a basket somewhere and I can't find it. So anyway, just a couple things I wanted to go over again. When we do the rest of the video on the engine, you'll see some more things coming up. But really, honestly, you guys, I don't think I'll ever put another $1,600 together unless I have like a good crank that I get for free, or a cheap crankshaft, and I've got some used rods or something like that I can just use because I've got them laying around. Otherwise, if I'm going to buy new parts and I'm going to build a new engine, it's going to be at least a 74, because it just is so nice to be able to do some of the mods you want to do, like shim the heads instead of shimming the barrels, you know, using the head gaskets. You know, there's just so many more options that you can do by giving the barrel a different place in the engine and trying to get the fire in the head. That's always something we always wanted to do back in the old days. But back in the old days, when you built a 74, it was you might as well build a 78. You know, it was like or 82 or something, because it was so much money. You had to buy, like, the rod options were really limited. I think all we could get, well, there was like either you could get Volkswagen rods clearance, which was not cheap to do, and it took some of the strength out of them and stuff, or you could get Carrillo rods. There wasn't these other rod companies that we have now, like, you know, the AA and CB makes them, so, you know, makes the clearance rods. So the options were really expensive. I mean, Carrillo rods back in that day were like $400. So if you had Carrillo rods and a $250 crankshaft back then, they were about $250 for an Acrasa. So you had to literally spend almost, you know, what was that? $600 when the whole engine kit was $150 to $300. It was a lot more money to go to a stroker. So that's why everybody built 1776s, because you could just, you know, a stock crankshaft, I think they were $30 or something like that. It was crazy cheap. So there was no reason to go to stroker stuff unless you just wanted to spend a lot of money. Well, nowadays, what's a stock reground crank run? I don't even know. What's a stock set of rods resized run? By the time you spend for those two items, and you still got a crappy stock crank, which is not nearly as good as a counterweighted crank. So if you got a counterweighted crank, They're the same price for a 69 as it is for a 74. And then all you can run with the 69, you can run the stock rods, but you got to get them resized, right? So you're really almost exactly at the same price doing a 69 as a 74. So it does not make, to me, any sense to do a 69 anymore. It just doesn't. So if you go 74, okay, to a 74, you get the clearance rods. You can go to the 5.4s. You can go to the 5.325s. You can go to the 5.5s and go B pistons. It depends on what you're trying to do. But, you just have to do your calculations. Remember, the theoretical difference, and it's not always the same, is exactly what you measure, okay? Theoretically, it's not always the same. Theoretical difference is you got 2.5 millimeters each direction on your stroke. All right, 2.5 millimeters. It's 5 millimeters difference. So it's 2.5 this way, 2.5 that way. So all you're adding is 2.5 millimeters here. So if you're going to add it between the cylinders, you can do it there. You can take it away by doing the shorter rods, the 5.325 rods. That's what we did on this one, so that we don't have too wide of an engine. You can go with the stock rods, okay? With stock length rods, you can't use stock rods with it, but you can use stock length rods, and then you'll have to shim here, and you can shim here and then step cut your heads so that you can run your deck height up to 0 or 5, whatever you want it. You can make it almost 0, whatever. And then have all your fire in your head, which would improve your performance. There's a ton of options when you go a little bit of stroke. The only difference is, remember, you saw that little bit of machine work on the case. If you go right at where those ribs were, the top ribs that go right between the cylinders, you're going to be pretty close. You could probably just machine it out right there like I did before we put it, actually somebody else did before we put it together, okay, and then put it together and then check it. It's probably going to be okay. And then go ahead and do the build. And it's really a cool way to build an engine. There's just, to me, the 69 is a dead crankshaft. There's just, to me, it's like, why? There's no reason. We are moving on with this engine. I'll show you a couple things that I've been doing off camera. Of course, I put distributor drive in. You drop it in so that it's going to offset and it goes to the right. And if you do it correctly, when you put your distributor in, which you should put your distributor in right after, because what will happen if you don't put it in, sometimes that distributor drive will lift up a little bit and it'll tear up that brass gear down there. So when you're turning it over and stuff like that, like if you've done it earlier in the game, there's 2 little washers you got to put down there first, okay? 2 of them. And then you put the distributor drive in. And what will happen is if it's not right, or if you don't have a distributor in there or the fuel pump, one of the 2, that holds the distributor drive down. So when you turn it over, it won't want to lift up. And because if it lifts up, sometimes you'll have it chew up that brass gear. So make sure you put a distributor in it right away after you do it. Even if we used to use a mock-up one, we had one like that, but this is the one that goes in it, so I don't care. The other thing I'm doing now, when you look down here, you see this little grinder mark right there. Is because when I put the tin on and mock up your tin, when you do this, that's why I have this thing screwed in so far. Okay, that's why I make them put a lot of threads in there, get it in nice and far so that it won't hit that tin, and it doesn't. So I'll show you. So you here, you just kind of put your tin on. I'm using 40 horse tin on this, and it's freaking George out a little bit. But I had to beat this part down a little bit. You don't want it to hit the pulley. That's the main thing. Hopefully when I put my pulley on, it doesn't hit. And so I'm going to put this on, then I'm put the pulley on, crank it, rotate it over a little bit to make sure it doesn't see. But if you see down there in the bottom, that little thing was standing up a little bit, so I had to grind that off, you know, so that it fits really nice. Because you don't normally have this cover on here. So if you guys noticed, I mean, I don't know, I did a short on the engine over at where was it? It was at the Buses by the Bridge. And CB Performance has a way that they put the plug in here and they tapped somewhere in the side of the case. And I don't know how they did that. So anybody know? Love to see a video or something showing that how that they did that. Because they had an out here and then an in somewhere over here. I don't know where. It was over, I'm going to assume that it was right here. But what's weird is that's where the pressure relief piston is. And so how could you have an in and an out in the same place? So they must have put like a plug between them. So had like this one coming up and then put a plug in here. And then had this one over the pressure relief valve. And then have it feed there. And then go down and I don't know. But there were two of them right here. Anyway, I thought it was really cool. I was like, man, if you could do that, you would eliminate this pump cover so you'd have more space in here. You wouldn't have to worry about this. That was a pretty slick deal. If I get over to CB Performance, I'm going to have them show me how to do that because I think that'd be pretty neat for us to show on video how to put those in there. Get your comments below on that. So again, this one here was all sandblasted. I left it at George's place, so I'm going to go ahead and sandblast this one, and we'll get that one ready. I've already put the cylinder tin on to mock it up to see if the 40 horse back tin will work, and it does on the single port. Guys, I didn't know. Because the single, I don't know if it does on the dual port, but if you look at the single port where they put the hole here is right there. This is 1 and 2, but I'm just showing you. It's a little bit further back, I think, than the dual port is. So anyway, I'm not sure, but I'll have a dual port tin here sitting so I can look. And these ones are slotted, so that's a little thing I noticed. I don't know if they're all slotted like that. I don't remember. But anyway, I don't know. I don't do this stuff every day like I used to. So anyway, it's occasional fun, classic stuff. Not doing it like to make money. That's a hard way to make money. So I have these here, license plate things. You get these online. I just can buy a bag of them. So I'll just put those on. Somehow I'll bend it. I'll put it on there, clamp it down, and then bend them up so they're out of the way, so they won't be dragging. So, you know, I don't want to hit the oil ends on the ground, but it's really, this thing has plenty of ground clearance, so we're not going to worry about that. All right, so here's how I had the oil line set up. I ran them down, of course, down underneath here. I finally, that's how I ended up right there with the oil line coming down, coming back up right here. Stays away from the exhaust because it's way over here, and goes through 2 holes in the tin, and then ends up being on the side here. And then where I'm going to place it, so I'm going to have the oil filter spin on somewhere over here, I'm not sure where, and then the cooler is going to be right here, and I'm going to have it perched taller on this end and shorter over there. I won't be able to get a screw in it up there, so I'll just use silicone to hold the ends down, and then these ones here I'll put a screw and a nut going through the other end maybe, and I'll put like make some aluminum or steel brackets to hold it up higher, so it'll be, you know, it'll have a good 2 or 3 inches, and it'll be close to that vent there, so should get plenty of air going down the road. Should be fine. I usually will put them underneath, but jacking this thing up and getting underneath it, you can only get it up so high, and it's really kind of hard to work on under here with that lift on it. So usually we've done them before. We usually will just put them right in this area, and you know, somewhere in here. A lot of times we'll put them right on that part where it kind of goes down an angle. Depends on whether you're running your here stuff. So we'll put them right in here in this area, and we've had the really good, there's a lot of air under here, so it's really actually good, probably better to put it over here, but it's actually a little more difficult for me since I've got to get under there and do all that there. So it's just easier if it's right here, and the air cleaner goes like right over here, so it's going to be kind of hiding it a little bit. So it'll be there, you'll see it, but it'll be a lot easier for me to do there. So that's what I'm going for. So I got the generator all hooked up and everything ready to go here. I got, the generator on, stands on, all the parts are on. Somebody asked in the other video, did I port the heads? The heads, yes, I did port the heads. I always like to port the single ports, the exhaust only. The exhaust has a really hard corner that has to go around, and if you just reshape that a little bit, get a lot more power. Well, what this one's going to do is this one's going to go into this like expansion chamber, and it comes out that really small tube. So even being ported, it's still going to help it flow better into that. And then once it goes into here, it'll create some sort of back pressure, of course, and really it'll come out of this exhaust very quick, very high velocity. So that'll give you a lot of torque. So, and that's what we're going for. We're not going for speed in this thing at all. So anyway, I don't know if I had any other questions that I was going to answer in this. A couple of people had some things they were asking. The valve geometry, again, that was stock, because we checked it and it was perfect with stock push rods. You didn't need to do cut to fits. The things to know, that's the things that are nice about doing the 74. If you use the short rods, it ends up being very close to the original width of the engine, and that's why we wanted that with this one, because we've already got, we're a 1/4 inch wider than than stock maybe, or more. So it's going to be tight fit to go in that bus. It's very tight already. So anyway, and this is what the flanges look like installed. Yeah, I know my welds got a little out of control right there, didn't they? I don't know what happened, but over here it's pretty good. I actually was tacking it. I kept missing. I missed the spot, but I got a really good weld around here. What I did on this is I was trying to weld it here, and then I went to the inside and welded it around the inside because it was just, and then ground it down nice and flat. But it was just too hard welding this angle, and I couldn't get it very clean. That's what I was doing there. So anyway, and all my bolts, all my nuts, if you realize, a lot of these ones, we used to have the original nuts that were on here, on here, all here and here. I use high temp RTV silicone. I use the one by Versachem Mega Black, and I put that on all the threads. All right, guys, we got the engine up here on the whatever test thing. I was going to put it right in the bus or in the truck, but I have some issues. I was going to show you guys. During the pandemic, I had issues trying to get the German boots, and of course, I don't know what I ended up with. Maybe Empi ones. They just failed. Look at them, big holes in them. So I'm waiting. I want to change those with the engine out. It's a lot easier in this thing to do. So I got some coming. I got German ones coming, and so I'm going to do that. Couple of other things. I need a starter, so I need to put, this was 6-volt starter, so we put a 12-volt flywheel on it because we're going to run 200 millimeter. So I got to get the starter in there. What I think I'm going to use is actually I'm going to have to open up the flywheel too. I just remembered that, so I have that lovely stuff to do. So I've got that to fix. I have to get a flywheel over here and put a gland nut on it, slide it on there. That's how you do that. You take a flywheel, put a gland nut in the other end, and just put it on and feel where it's going to hit. And be careful not to get rid of this edge right here. You grind that edge off. That's the, past that, this little edge. That's the machine surface that the engine fits into. And if you do that, your transmission's case is no good. So sometimes you got to take some off of here, but you got to make sure that little ridge, that ridge right there, this machined edge is still there. So you can grind this ridge off, but you got to keep that machined edge still there. So anyway, for doing the flywheel fitting, and usually there's some around in here to do, like I gotta take that over a little more, and like a little bit of that bump and that bump there. I'm trying to remember. Just take a flywheel, slide it on there. It's pretty easy to do with the gland nut on it, and usually can figure it out. So I got that to do still, so that'll be fun. And I'm waiting for the boots to come right now. They're a few days out, so anyway, we'll move on with just making the engine start on the stand. So I just kind of got my filter and my line set up. I'll make these a little nicer while I'm doing it. I'm not going to run the fan. Not going to worry about that. Only going to run it for about 20 minutes and that's it. So not going to worry about the fan running. Got a cooler there. It'll be enough for 20 minutes. So anyway, then for the just part of the thing, I'm going to go with the Castrol. I like to use the Kendall because it comes in quarts. They're both good oil. Castrol's really fine, but Kendall is, I'm going to say it might be just a little bit better. Castrol's very good oil. So some guys use pen grade. I really don't know anything about pen grade, but this is really good. So is Shell Rotella. It's really good oil too. I would not use Valvoline Racing. I've had problems with that oil. That oil says all this great stuff on the label, but we tested it back in the day, and it used to just break down in a Volkswagen. If you put it, it would not get 3,000 miles before it was just completely just broke down in my car. That's for sure. I mean, that's because I was really hard on it, but I don't know. I had other friends with the exact same issues. We all stopped using it and either went to Castrol or Kendall at that time. So I stick with the same rules we've always done. And a lot of us tried synthetic back in the old days. The synthetic oils changed. I mean, some of the, like the old Mobil 1 used to eat up the seals on the VW. And the seals would just like turn into mush. So we weren't using that back in the old days because of that reason. Now I've heard they've reformulated it. I don't know. So a lot of guys were using synthetic, I've heard now. But back in the early days, Mobil 1 just used to just mess with the seals. The rubber compound wasn't working well with it. So anyway, we'll just stick with this. And this is good oil, so about as good as you can get. So anyway, we'll go with that. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to crank it over to the oil pressure comes up. Battery's pretty low though, so I don't know. Maybe it won't work. So I've got an oil pressure gauge hooked up to it. I have the ignition disconnected. I don't want it to start. I just want to crank the engine over, get oil through all the passages and everything, get the pressure up. You'll actually hear it. It'll crank faster once it builds up oil pressure. Yeah, let it cool for a minute. Starter's hot. Let the battery charge up a little more. I'll bring it back in. I decided to go ahead and pull the spark plugs out. Don't really need to do that, but it's just because I'll show you. This thing has jumper cables as battery cables, so they're not very, jumper cables are not really thick enough. They're getting hot before the starter is, and the battery's a little low. And the other reason is we use that really sticky lube. When we put this together, we use that really sticky lube, and it's really sticky on the parts, and it cranks over kind of slow because of that. It's not because it's not lubricated properly, anything bad. It's just the assembly lube we use is very sticky, and it's just turning over so slowly. I'm hoping it's going to turn over a little faster now. Let's see. Let me see without, otherwise I'll just wait for the battery to charge up. Let's see. A little better. Starting to get oil now. Still watching the oil gauge. Want to see the oil gauge come up? Sure got all this everything. I can just tell those cables are so hot. They are super hot. Go a little bit more. You can actually hear it getting quieter. You can actually hear the oil starting to get onto everything. It's getting a little quieter now. It's already working its way through the whole system. Now I notice I've got a leaky poo. Time when you want to kind of look for that stuff. Well, that thing came loose. Alright, so my AN fitting's a little bit loose. So tighten that up. Kind of look for that stuff while we're doing it. Right, so we set it overnight. I put on my jumper box here at the same time so that it's not taking all that stress through the one. It's able to crank a little faster, and the oil pressure comes up. Let's take a look here. I'll let you guys watch the gauge here and watch it for me. Let me know what happens. So we got oil through the whole system. Yay. You can see we've got oil pressure that's what's up to what 30 pounds or something. So there's 100. So it was up about 40 on crank. So that's good oil pressure. So now we're ready to start the engine. But I need to go get gas. It's all I want to do is get it to crank over and actually get oil pressure. So now we'll move on to the starting process. And I'll put the spark plugs back in. And you can see it started going a lot easier. It started to go a little bit easier before that, but once it got full pressure, the engine cranked over much faster and easier. So, but I needed a little bit more speed to get it to do it. So, and it just wasn't quite doing it yesterday. So anyway, let's get it started. All right, well, my jumper pack's kind of dead, so let's see if this thing will start on its own. I have no idea. This is not scripted or programmed or anything. I have no clue. The timing should be pretty close. We have a little electric pump hooked up and it pushes fuel up to the carburetor. I don't know if it's all the way up yet, but I think it is. I don't know if it's filled the float bowl. Let me grab a little bit of carb spray and put some in the carburetor. Just do this here. Sticking it down the. I get it some down that tube. So there's something in the flow bowl. Oh wait, I got a huge vacuum leak. Gotta fix that. That's not gonna work. All right, let's check ignition. Got ignition there. All right, let's see what happens. Maybe nothing. Nope. Oh. It's wanting to fire right now. I gotta have to put that jumper on there. I can't get it to go over fast enough. She's about to start. Right, I only got 2 bars on that thing, so I don't know if it'll do it or not. Let's see. Not good. Or something down the carb. That probably evaporated while I was 10 minutes of trying to find something to make a vacuum plug. Jumper's dead. Error. That's all we get. Have to charge it up. Come back in about 30 minutes or so. All right, a couple hours later, let's see. I'm gonna put some more of this in there. Turn this on. Almost wanting to start now. It's not like it's retarded. Just a little bit. Let's try a little more advanced. We'll try again. Maybe we'll get later. You guys saw it before I did. Standing in it. All right, nice. Well, I couldn't see where it was coming from. I just turned off the motor, but look at that. I took this off, put it back on. It's gonna make a mess. So anyway, I took it off and put it back on, I guess to check to see if it had oil in it before when it was cranking so slow. So yeah, that frickin' thing, doggone it. What a mess. Okay, well, I'll get that fixed. I'll bring you back in. All right, an hour later, quart and a half of oil mess and bag of kitty litter and a bunch of super clean, power wash, all that stuff. Looks like we're kind of back to normal. Still a bit of a mess. But anyway, let's see if I put another. It was about a quart and a half low. It looks, I can't tell. I'm going to fire it up for a second and then recheck it. So we'll see if it starts again. I don't know if I have enough battery juice. Hopefully I do. It seems to be low. I mean, it's just not cranking over very fast even now. And it's not maybe the starter's no good. I don't know what we got in here. This is just junk we had laying around we used to make this thing. So anyway, let's give it a shot. Turn it on. See if we're lucky. Okay, I'm going to check the oil. I'll turn this off so I don't run my battery dead. I'll check the oil real quick. See what we got in here. Sounds pretty good. Not a lot of exhaust leaks. Didn't sound like. Oh yeah, she's low. So anyway, I pumped out probably about almost 2 quarts. So now we've got oil in the line. I haven't checked the oil pressure yet. Don't really like to have this long thing over here. I don't know. I can't find my other one, so. I usually have one I just plug right in the side here so I can see it while I'm working on it. But I'll move the oil pressure over here so I can look at it. Fire it up again once I get oil in it, and we'll take a look. Alright, so we're full of oil. Check our oil pressure here. And I'll put it up here maybe. I don't know. Doesn't really work very good. Right there. So I can see it at least. Turn on the battery, the juicy battery. Okay. Ignition, I think that's on. Sound like ignition is off. Okay. No more surprises. Kind of gets me a little freaked out when something like that happens, because you just wonder if it's going to snowball, right? Sometimes it happens that way. Sometimes it just starts snowballing. So we had that whatever about, I guess it was about, I don't know, I had the tack on over here, so it's probably about 2,500 RPMs, about 80 pounds oil pressure. So we don't have any oil pressure issues at all. And then, so anyway, let's give it another shot, see what it... cool though is a 20-minute break-in. I don't want to run it too much longer, and I'm a fan of the cooler, so you can see it idle, but gotta tune it a little bit. Yeah, it's a little, open up the, I have to change the idle jet, because it was set up for 40 watts, so I gotta get it to run a little better. It's gotta run a little smoother than that, it can. That's a big cam in there, I mean, for a... You can really... Once it revs up to a certain point, you can feel it just want to go up because that cam is on it, so it'll help get it down the road. But I think I get it idle a little bit smoother, even though it's got a 100. I think it'll get a little smoother than that. There's a lot of back pressure on that exhaust too. Boy, I'll tell you. And she's hot right now because it's, you know, it's all brand new. So I'm going to shut her down, let it cool off a little bit, a little more testing, and we'll see how it does. Past 20 minutes at least. I mean, we're good past 20 minutes, so I can't let it idle until then, so it's been longer than that now. Alright, so you guys were wondering what happened with the oil filter, why it did that, is what happened is it was cranking super slow, right? At first, and I was like, I wonder if it's even getting oil to the oil filter. So I loosened up the oil filter and saw oil, then I tightened it back up. But I think what happened is my hands were slipping on it, and I think I got it tight enough, but I probably didn't. And I think there was oil too much oil between the two surfaces, and so it got underneath the gasket. And then when I was trying to tighten it up, I was tightening it against the oil, and it wasn't getting tight. So that's what happened. And then it just pushed the gasket out as soon as it got up to RPMs. As soon as I revved it up, you could see in that portion of the video where it just revved up. Now there's another oil leak right now, just a little one. I mean, it's actually, I felt right here. It's really hot right now, so I don't really want to mess with it. But probably need to just give this a couple more wrench spots, you know. Another revolution or two. It's on between here and here. And when I put the Teflon tape on here, I make sure that there's nothing going to the oil gallery or anything that can go on that side of it. So it's only on the threads. I make sure it's not anywhere near the portion where it's doing the because this is pipe fitting, right? Anywhere near the end of the pipe where it fits in the other one, because you don't want that in your oil, in your passages, because it'll cause an issue. So anyway, overall I think it runs fine. I just need to tune the carburetor. I'm gonna let it cool down. Then I'm gonna let it cool down because this is so hot. I don't even want to touch this right here to tighten that up, because if something happens and it gets bursts or anything like that, it'll really be bad. So it's so hot, the oil's so hot. So right now I'm gonna let this cool off. I'm gonna retighten that. I'll check it again, see if it leaks. It's just a little bit of an oil. It's just a little bit. I mean, it's not really little. It's terrible. I don't like any oil leaks. So I'll get that tightened up. It's not the AN fitting. It's actually this one right here, the threaded. Probably I could feel it right here. It was kind of moist, and up here it wasn't. So anyway, I believe that's all it is. No big deal. I got to get the timing. Timing's still too far advanced right now. And then, but I can't idle it. So if I try and idle it, you know, it won't idle if I have it if I bring down the advance. So there's that. So I've got to get that right. And look, I've got the throttle all the way open. That's what I'm saying. I can't tune it right now because I've got to get, I think the idle jet's too lean. It's got to be too lean. I mean, I think I've got some more of those. Let's see what it's in there right now. I'll pull that out. It's in the side of the carburetor if you guys didn't know. It's just this right here. It's right there. Little jet. You pull it out. check that. Usually what I do is while it's running, I'll just start to back that out a little bit. And if it starts to pick up RPMs, then I know it's too lean. I just kind of just crack it loose and just open it up a little. I mean, I know it's too lean, so I need it richer. So sometimes it'll be between jets. So I'll actually back it out a little bit and peen it so it stays in the position. That's an old VW trick, guys. So sometimes we'll do that and peen it and leave it so it's a little tiny bit loose, but when you peen it, it stays in place. Or take it out and go with a richer jet. Just depends. If it's sometimes between the two. Sometimes I'll put a richer one in, it'll be too rich, and then I put the lean one in back in, and I'll just back it out just a little bit, peen it, and they're good to go. So that's a way you tune these things. So anyway, got to do that. I got to get it so it runs. We will come back and take a look at it in a minute here, and then I'm not sure. I'll let this cool off for a couple hours, and then I'll tighten up the oil cooler mess. I don't have any more oil. It's just driving me nuts. I can't stand this. This is such a disaster. All that oil everywhere. Anyway, so yeah, I saved. I'm not like my friend Pete. You know, I like the guy. I almost think he's gonna laugh every time I see him. You know, I think he's just ready to laugh right then. You know, and he's just holding it back because you know, I'm not gonna do the swearing and yelling like I did after I shut off the camera from this oil mess, because don't think it didn't happen. But yeah, because it was like, just like drove me nuts. Anyway, but yeah, we got it running. I figured it would run, no problem. I didn't think it'd be an issue. It just, you know, it started right up pretty good. Well, once it got to crank, and something's wrong. I don't know if you know, it's partly because these jumper cable setup we got here are just not enough juice is flowing through those. So, or maybe the battery's already dead. You know, it's, oh well, yeah, I did buy that in 21, didn't I? It's been a few years. Maybe the battery's toast on that thing, because it's not cranking over. I'll check it with the tester once I get it all charged up, and then could be the battery's done. Never leave that one off the table. But anyway, I'll check that out and see. I mean, it was Walmart's cheap battery. You know, when they do the value start, so they don't last that long, but they're okay. They usually last fine in a Volkswagen. Anyway, I'll bring you guys back in. All right, guys, so I cooled it off and tightened up the oil leak. I'll see if it doesn't leak oil and do a little cold start on it. See what happens. I don't know if I got it turned on or off. Probably not on. The jumper cables seem to need to be on there, so. Pour it down.
Choke needs to be a little tighter.
Yeah, it choke's a little bit loose. I think I better tighten it up just a little bit. Probably get it to be a little bit better when it's cold.
We'll warm it up a minute and we'll take a look at it once it's warmed up. Well, it's not totally warm yet, but get there. Probably run it a little bit fast idle because of lift. Probably around there. That's pretty nice though. So that's about 3,500, 4,000 RPM. Just revs right up there. Sounds good. Alright, I'm gonna say it's ready to go in. I mean, it was ready to go in before I could have fixed that stuff in the bus, but I'm gonna say it's ready to go.
sounds pretty good. You can hear that, you can feel that cam when it gets up to the RPMs though, it starts to kick in. So around about 2,500 RPMs, you can really feel the cam curve start to work. And yeah, that seems like it's going to make that truck pull real good. Way different than a 40 horse. All right, I guess that's it for this. I don't know what's next. I got to do a lot of work to get that bell housing ready. Gonna run down real quick and grab my starter, the 12-volt starter. So, and then we'll see if that battery's any good, right? Maybe my luck, I'll have to buy a battery too. All right. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hear your comments on what you think.